Michael Wolff is a contributing editor to Vanity Fair and knows Rupert Murdoch better than most, having spent 50 hours interviewing him and his family for a biography. He joins us now from New York. Michael Wolff, this talk that we hear over on this side of the Atlantic, that Murdoch might just get rid of all his newspapers here in order to concentrate on television, does it make sense to you?
Well, we hear it on this side of the Atlantic too, but I think what we're hearing is the voice of panic. Nobody knows what to do. I think every scenario is open for discussion. There are also there's always been a faction within News Corp here that says, why do we have these newspapers? British newspapers makes no sense to us. We own a lot of businesses which are growing. That business is shrinking. So this becomes inside of News Corp a political moment to say, hey, let's get rid of them. But I also think in a more general way, it's looking at this crisis and saying we are really in trouble. It's also looking and saying, how do we continue to run the News International? You know, so many of its executives are now utterly discredited.
Are you referring to members of his family?
Well, I'm referring to Rebecca Brooks. I'm referring to James Murdoch, who obviously has suffered an enormous loss of credibility.
Is part of the problem here the way in which Rupert Murdoch runs what is a public company as if it were a private fiefdom?
Well, I think that is a question that's coming up in this country more and more, that this is an issue of governance. And that's a question that will have to go to the board. And we now have a situation, of course, where the Murdochs, people named Murdoch, are not accountable in conventional ways. And we have a situation in which people named Murdoch are suffering a hemorrhage of credibility. You know, and I think that they are reasonably at the point where this hemorrhage has been so great that you have to ask, are these people who ought to be running a great public company?
He's a pretty old man now. Look, 20 years down the road, is this going to be a company, do you think, controlled by a Murdoch?
You know, I would say, you know, a matter of months down the road, this may not be a company controlled by someone named Murdoch.
Do you have any insight into why it is he's so protective of Rebecca Brooks?
Well, I do, and I think it's a family issue, number one. And remember, the Murdochs see this as a family company. The first issue is what's good for the family. And Rebecca is very close to James. She's close to his daughter Elizabeth, her husband Matthew Freud. You know, I know that Murdoch and Rebecca themselves are very close. You know, I mean, Rebecca told me the story once about she stopped smoking because Murdoch challenged her in a swimming race. If he won, she would give up cigarettes. I mean, so we are talking about a really family, intimate relationships. The other aspect of this is that traditionally, when someone in News Corp is attacked by people outside of News Corp, they close ranks. They never, ever fire anybody. In New York, at the New York Post, it was they had to admit that the editor of Page 6, Richard Johnson, was taking bribes, literally taking bribes, being paid to write stories. Well, Richard still works for News Corporation.
Yeah, but there's an entire newspaper shut down here.
Well, absolutely. I mean, they shut down a newspaper so that, in part, the executives could keep their jobs.
And now, do you hear anything about potential lawsuits there?
Well, there has been a shareholders' lawsuit filed in Delaware today, and I expect there will be more suits. Of course, there will be.
And what are they trying to claim?
they are trying to claim that there is a level of unfitness here.
Michael Wolff, thank you.